to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a roll call, please. Weigel? Here. Moran? Here. Bolich? Here. Eustace? Frizzalone? Okay, we have minutes from October 18th. Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion, second. Any additions or corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Start off, let's introduce each other so we know who's here today. Start at this end of the table, and go down, and then go around the room.
Bob Christensen, Commercial Plan Examiner for Will County.
Owen Needham, Residential Plans Examiner.
Ray Simplinsky, Chief Building Official for the Will County Building Division.
Tom Weigel, Chairman of the Land Use Committee in this committee.
Don Moran, Will County Board, District 3.
Steve Ballard, Will County Board, District 7.
Larry Rock, Assistant Chief, Frankfurt Fire District, and with the Will County Fire Chiefs Association.
Mark Sickles, Fire Marshal, Mokina Fire District.
Bob Tanucci, Illinois Regional Manager for the National Fire Sprinkler Association.
Peg Paul, resident of Frankfurt, and also the Communications Manager with the nonprofit Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition.
Pat Leah, Northern Illinois Fire Sprinkler Advisory Board.
Bob Tucko, Fire Chief, Homer Township Fire District.
Todd Fonfair, Deputy Chief, Northwest Homer Fire.
Jason Milan, Millwood Fire Protection District Assistant Chief.
Kurt Paddock, Director of the Will County Land Use Department.
Brian Radner, Assistant Director, Land Use Department.
Jenny Seaborg, Manhattan resident.
Roger Seaborg, Manhattan Township resident.
Dan Delamata, Architect.
Dan Cazzaro, employee of Dan Delamata Architect.
Tom Joseph, Main Street, Three Rivers, Illinois Association of Realtors.
Patrick O'Donnell, O'Donnell Construction, New Lenox.
Bob Neal, International Code Council.
George Marsack, Business Representative, Sprinklers, Local 281.
Mike Schauer, Representative from Local 281, Sprinkler Fitters.
Keith Ashelman, State's Attorney's Office.
Joe Casella, Fire Inspector for the Noka Fire Protection District.
Dean Turner, Fire Marshal with New Lenox Fire District.
J.B. Brown, Fire Inspector, New Lenox Fire District.
Dan Forsythe, Fire Chief, Manhattan Fire Protection District.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Ray, our Chief Building Official, get us off in the program.
Well, we're going to try and make it as painless and as quick as possible today, but by the same token, this is for all of you to tell us, give us your input. Tell us what you're thinking about these various items and what we've done. Now, we're going to start it off with, we've had, and once again, on our internet website, you'll find Will County Land Use, and on that you'll find a list of divisions. In the building division, when you key on that, you will come to a page, which is our home page, and you'll notice on the home page it'll say various options. One of those are documents, and the one document is the ordinance, our current Will County ordinance with all the strikeouts, with all of the changes that we're looking at. For the most part, most are housekeeping, but I've got to tell you that it also has to do with fire suppression and 1 and 2 family dwellings. So this, although we've put that before you, I know that not everybody goes onto our website, so that's where you can find that. There had been a directive in a previous meeting where we discussed these items in a public section where we took in input and we tried to bring that together with what we've had to date and make the best judgments possible per the subcommittee's wishes to present what we have today. Now, you'll see that we have 3 items underneath our one section D, and those are what we want to talk about, but nonetheless, there is room as well for other comments, for other sections of the code. But what I'd like to do is get by this first, and I think as far as the possibilities of fire suppression, if that comes up under the current partnership that we have with the fire protection districts, I think that would be an appropriate place for it. And if I haven't said it before, and I'm going to do this myself, I think, if you have cell phones, if you could put them to vibrate or silent. It's not that I'm easily distracted, but I am very easily distracted. So we have a group of people here today that I'm hoping that will give us a good representation of how the public feels and how they feel. And what we're looking for, first of all, in Will County, we've been looking to try to make our home building hit the mark and maybe exceed it a little bit. And by doing that, we wanted to get your feelings about what you thought about the possibility of offering incentives. And the incentives would be pretty much driven by fees. So it could be a reduction in your building permit fee. This would offset some of these things. We would have schedules and such that you could look at. And we're going to try to make them attainable too. We know that the Illinois Energy Conservation Code has pretty much ruled out a lot of the mainstays that we have because now they're a law. That's one of the things we can't change. They are now law. So even if the county doesn't enforce them, if you build for someone and they find that you didn't institute these various things, they can sue you and win. So we have those things that we now do by law, but what we're hoping to do is if we get an idea that incentives are good as far as the building is concerned, we want to include those. We want to bring that to the subcommittee to allow them to digest how the public feels about this before we go forward. So on the incentives, I'm going to ask, is there any input, is there anything that people would like to see if they are for incentives or if they think that at this point they're just really not doable? This could be very quick.
I'm for incentives.
If I could have a show of hands, maybe as far as people thinking that incentives are worth pursuing? Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would say at least 50% of our room is saying that they are. So I'm going to at least take it to this point where we're going to pursue a schedule. Of course, the fees and such would have to be worked out separately in that type of atmosphere that would allow some sort of equity between what you're doing and the dollars off of your permit. So we will do that. I will bring that before the subcommittee for consideration in a more defined form. That being generally, I think, taken care of at this point, and I know what we're all waiting for, so we're going to get to it quickly here. The next is the International Green Construction Code, and it actually is the 2012, so I should put down 2012. Everybody's heard green and sustainable. Those are the catchphrases. We have to make everything green and sustainable. You hear LEEDs Platinum, you hear Gold, you hear IGCC, you hear the old 700, you hear ASHRAE. There's a lot of things going on. But the International Code Council actually came up with something that was doable using a lot of what we already have out there. About half the book is ASHRAE. These are things that are tried, true, tested, and have been proven. And the other is just mechanics. And to illuminate us a little bit with that, I had actually spoken with Bob Neal, who is with us this evening. And many times when you hear International Code Council, you think that someplace out in France, there's a group of people that get together, sort of, the New World Order, and they create this stuff. But Bob, I would ask you if you can just tell them how these codes are created and by whom.
Sure, great, thanks, I'd be happy to. I'm the regional representative for the International Code Council. I represent Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Missouri. So I've got quite a different, every time you cross the street in Illinois, you change codes. Wisconsin, the out-of-state codes are pretty much the same from town to town. Iowa is a little more consistent. Missouri is a lot like Illinois in that it's all local. The codes are developed by you guys, and I know the fire service guys have had a big stake in how our codes are developed. Ray and his colleagues on the building side, They propose code changes. The code changes go basically to our office in Country Club Hills. Most of you are probably familiar with BOCA, Building Officials and Code Administrators. BOCA is one of the 3 organizations that formed ICC. It was BOCA, SBCCI in Birmingham, Alabama, and ICBO out in Los Angeles. And those 3 totally U.S.-based code writing organizations got together, and the regulated community, the architects, the developers, the people that were getting regulated by the codes all thought that they should have a consistent set of codes. So that's why ICC was formed, the International Code Council, in about 2002. But in the way codes are developed is, let's say that Will County planning has a change to the International Building Code that makes maybe construction a little more efficient and the building a little safer. And it's implemented into the county code. Well, I would encourage Ray and his colleagues to submit that code change to ICC to be part of the national code. And the same thing happens with other safety matters that you guys find locally. That's basically how the codes are developed, is local government, local code enforcement on both the fire and the building side say this needs to be fixed or this needs to be improved, and it comes to ICC. Now, we're the staff. All we do is we do what our members want us to do. We facilitate the membership. So, for instance, Will County would be considered a major jurisdiction, would have 12 votes on the national voting for how, what code changes get moved ahead and what code changes don't make it. So the code changes are presented. Then we have what's called committee action hearings, and they'll be this spring in Memphis. And there's a committee of, it's got to be a certain amount of people like your fire guys here and Ray, certain amount of regulators, and then there's some people from the industry, and they make a committee decision as to whether or not these submitted code changes pass or fail. Once the committee makes a decision, then the assembly, which would be any ICC member, it could be a building official, a fire official, it could be an architect, an engineer, or someone of public interest, the assembly votes to either agree or disagree with what the committee did. Now, if they agree with the committee, nothing happens. It basically stays as a code change. If they disagree with the committee, it goes into our next set of hearings, which we would call final action hearings, which is usually in the fall. And at final action hearings, only regulators, that would mean fire inspectors, building inspectors, fire marshals, building officials, are the only people that can vote on those arguments, to settle those arguments with what the committee did. And once that is done, then it's either up or down on the committee's actions, and that becomes the code. Now, we just finished hearings on residential, energy, and the fire code, plus some other codes. And they'll be published. We're going to have all of our codes except for the green code will be the 2015 version will be published around June of this coming year. So that's the code. Now, keep in mind what the National Code Development System does is what we refer to it in the industry as a model code. And it's not, nobody is sitting in Washington or France or anywhere saying you have to follow this code. It's a baseline code. It's a minimum standard. You can, we have communities that make amendments to the code to make it more strict, and communities that make amendments to the code to make it less strict. So it's basically a way, the International Code Council is a support organization for people who are concerned about building and fire safety to advance the best industry snapshot of building and fire safety in the United States. So, sir?
I had a question.
with the codes, you said that let me rephrase this. It seems like every year the codes get more and more strict. There's no regard for the cost upon the homeowners or the businesses when you talk about codes. Take, for instance, your energy code.
Right.
Your energy code says that if you want to replace a window or a door or fix a piece of siding, you have to have a certain R rating. Well, in order to do that, you need to get a permit. If you tell the average citizen that elects all the people on this board that they have to get a permit to fix their door, to replace a window, to fix some siding, they get pretty darn mad. And you know what? I got a real bone to pick with the way the codes are written and enforced because of that. And I'm working with state legislators right now to try and change some of this stuff legislatively in the state. And I don't know if it'll happen or not, but on this board, I'm going to work my darndest to not allow the codes to be over-restrictive.
Well, that's why I said when the codes are finished, local government, state government, and actually the federal government, for instance, all of the buildings that house our military people are built on the codes that people like Ray produce. The State Department uses it to build embassies all over the world. But, so from federal, state to local, like I said, the local government, the enforcing government, or we call it authority having jurisdiction, has the ability to take that model code and say, in your jurisdiction, or, what town are you from?
I'm from Homer Glen.
Okay, so you're from Homer Glen. So you can, you might want to talk to Joe Baber and say, Joe, when we adopt the code in Homer Glen, let's take that out about the permit. Let's just let a guy put a window in.
I was told that we on our committee here, I was told that if we don't enforce that with a permit.
No, and the state energy code, that might be a slippery slope because it's a state energy code.
Well, the state energy code is probably the most restrictive to people.
Right.
Where people get the maddest about. But, there's other stuff too.
But see, now the state energy code, I was just at a meeting with the state energy code advisory council about 6 weeks ago. And there's 2 home builders on that council, there's 2 building officials, there's architects, engineers, and there's state staff. Those people can be talked to. I mean, you might want to contact your local, Will Grundy home builders and say, hey, when that guy's down in Springfield deliberating on the state energy code, here's some input for you.
See, the energy code to me should be voluntary. If you want to make your house so it's super insulated, God bless you. And if you don't, you're going to have to pay for it by higher energy costs. But, what we're doing is forcing our people to get permits for everything. And in reality, they're not doing it anyway. Well, and then they're getting caught and getting fines, and then they're calling me up or other people complaining. And it all goes back to well, I didn't realize what you said there, so I'll have to bring that up with Ray at a different time.
He can probably be a little more specific on that. I'm more of a government person than a code person, but if you renovate...
Let's bring Bob into this sort of this thing. As I said before, the Energy Code, the 2012 International Energy Conservation Code, is a state law.
And that's why I contacted the state reps.
And that's why we are not able to interpret anything, we are not able to change anything. It's a law. If you want to put a window in your house and it doesn't meet the state energy code, you sell your house and that new person finds out, they can sue you. You've broken the law. And this is what we've put out there. Unfortunately, that's it. The IAC is the ADA, only Illinois style, and it's a law.
We just made a law.
Radon, which is an appendix, is now a law. It's no longer anything that we can call a county code. It's a law.
I just had a call from a state rep who said they changed the law for mechanical septic tanks aren't allowed. So she's going to have to cut down over 100 oak trees because of putting a new septic field in order to sell the property, which means she probably won't. And that's a state rep. So,
That would
I
be
mean,
the Illinois plumbing code, right?
yeah, so it's all these codes, you know, I think what it really needs to have happen is that every 2 years, 5 years, whatever, all the codes are completely abolished, and you start all over again and rewrite them so that they make sense, because, you know, we can't keep getting stricter and stricter. Pretty soon someone's going to say that your car isn't going to have a code. You know, that you're going to have, you know, like, we can't have a car that has a window that isn't the right R ratings, because it might be, I mean, that's where we're headed, you know, and we have to stop that direction.
What we have to do is, and it can be mitigated, and sometimes the codes are relaxed in some areas. They don't always get stricter. The problem that we have is, and once again, why do we have codes in Will County? Well, one of the things, our unincorporated Will County has a certificated staff. Each one of my inspectors hold certificates. They've all been tested, my plans reviewers and myself, in various areas, and we're all combination inspectors, so that we understand these minimum requirements, which are the codes. The people that look at that is called the Insurance Service Organization. And we have a rating from 1 to 10, the lower rating being the better you can get. And with ISO, what that does is when they put it out there, when they're saying, you know, your minimum levels are pretty good, and the way you inspect those with the staff that you have, because they are trained, they are tested, they're proven, we know that this is a better product. So you know what we're going to do, unincorporated Will County? We're going to give it a lesser rate for your homeowner's insurance, because on an average, you're getting a better quality product. It doesn't have to be more expensive, it just has to be more meticulously built. It doesn't have to be over-inspected, it just has to meet the minimums. But the inspectors better know what they're looking for, and they better know what's embodied in each one of these code books, because that's what we're tested on. That's what we have to qualify, and that's where our continued education goes each and every year. Because if you don't have that, you lose your certification. So that's why we have codes. It actually benefits all of Will County, not just those building, but everybody if they're built to those standards. I do have copies of this, so you can take one home if you wish. They're on this table. And I know it's tough sometimes to say, I got to get a permit. Jeez. You know, I'm going to blow $100 here. And for what? They're just going to raise my taxes. Well, not really. Because with that permit, I've been able to go after a roofer who didn't do his job and take his $10,000 bond to make sure it got done. And when it did get done, it was done correctly. That put that person in a better home and a higher quality product for no other reason other than mechanics and good practice. And we've done that not once, twice, but I've done that a number of times. Because I've yet to have anybody come to my building counter and say, I'm going to do a terrible job on this house. I'm not going to build this with it, and you're going to have to put up with it. Everybody that comes in says, you know how I built? I built to the nth degree. I build it better than anybody else. I can do this. So
I'm referring to maintenance and repair items that the homeowner can do themselves.
And the homeowner's allowed by our contractor ordinance to do them themselves, but they do have to meet the law.
Well, that's my argument. The code is too strict and it shouldn't be there.
If you want to change the law, as you said, your legislators are the conduit. Those are the guys you've got to talk with. And that's what we're hoping to do. I know that we've had this conversation before, but anybody who wishes to change the law, the only way to do it is to actually go downstate. Get your lobbyists going, because that's the only way it's going to work. I would very much love to look at that energy code and make it fit Will County. But unfortunately, we're given that law, and like anybody else, we have to enforce it.
Ray, what is this that you got here, though? What did you have on the agenda?
The International Green Construction Code, it could be energy conservation. It could also be using different glazing. It could be using a little more light, natural light. It could be a number of things. What we're trying to do with this is remove the barriers. Because right now, if you come in with a green building, we have no way of measuring that. no way of knowing because we don't have the code in place to do it. Now, we're not telling you you have to, but wouldn't it be nice if you wanted to do something, and maybe in those incentives, that you wanted to do something green? You wanted to do something more sustainable. You wanted to use some materials that were maybe recycled, reused. You wanted to use some materials that were more energy efficient. You wanted to use some materials that are basically on the cutting edge of support and structure. We have no way of measuring that. And what we're trying to do this code cycle, which hasn't been done before in Will County for their building ordinance, is to reach out to everybody, not just make this in front of the board, sort of, this is what we're changing, and then it just mysteriously gets passed. We want to be very transparent. We want the input to tell us, is this something you want to do? Is this a path you want to proceed? Because I think in this building, and I could defer to Mr. Stippen also, the other-hatted supervisor was just to tell you how this building was created and the fact that it's green and sustainable. So, you know, what benefits did you get on your permit? Absolutely none. But yet you did have an outpouring of cash to do something a little different. So what we're looking at is having a way to measure that, and then maybe having a way to plug it into the incentives. I know it sounds a little bit rosy, but it actually happens, and they are doing it. And before some of the municipalities within our bounds do this, I think we should be the leaders. We have been so far in many, many things in Will County. So this is one of the things that we're looking for, and whether it's something that the populace, the fire protection, the architects, the home builders, the residents want to see as far as should this be a route we pursue. So I'm putting this out as far as any kind of feedback. You know, what did the home builders feel? Those people who are in the communities building, if nothing else for themselves, would they like to see us pursue something like this? So are there any kind of comments on the voluntary adoption? And we put this before the subcommittee, and the subcommittee said it's worth looking at, but they want to hear from the public.
As long as it stays volunteer, I would be for it. Definitely, but
Okay.
You get incentives with it, especially on permits, because permits aren't cheap anymore, so.
So we have that.
I was going to say, in most residential, it takes too long to recoup the money that you put out in the first place to make this sustain, unless you intend to live in and have your family live in this house for the rest of their careers. But for commercial ventures, it does make sense, because these are buildings that they figure are going to be there for 50 years, rented, etc. And the output initially is expensive, but in the long term, they get the money back. And once they start getting it back, they get more back every year.
Okay, our other comment was, in residential environments, we do know that the payback is probably going to be realized by your grandchildren at some time. But we do know also in a commercial environment, there are a number of things that have gone on that have made this a little more viable, and the payback is more immediate. We do have a few in the area that have done that, even as far as a Denny's and a strip mall. So they have realized that. So that is another good point. Anyone else?
Ray, in this environment in Will County, you know, I work all over the Chicago area. If you bring in this green code up on the North Shore, it's going to be receptive greatly. Down here, people really don't care. I mean, that's a fact of life. It's a different environment down here. People just want a house, move in, it costs this amount, and that's it. And it's the same thing with the business community. You know, you don't find this down here.
You know, I'd like to not make that generalization, because beyond a doubt, I've seen municipalities that'll have cookie cutter production homes, one after another, that look all the same. that are basically out of a package, they're panel built, or they come out basically the same thing over and over and over. But in the county, I've got to be honest with you, most of the county construction, especially what we're seeing now, are custom homes. And right now, in Wheatland Township, that one, was that over 12,000 square feet?
I think it was over 6 or 7,000
square feet. We're getting into that environment, and that person didn't have to put copper all over. That person didn't have to put various pieces of glass in, but they did. And I've got to tell you that, you know, with Will County, we do have the attitude with the state residential. They have some pretty nice looking buildings. And I've seen today, unfortunately, I've seen some of the buildings in other places than where they were actually constructed. I've seen some of the things that they had done with additional insulation, with different roof treatments, so that it is catching on. But once again, I don't think it's going to be something that everybody runs out for, but one to break down the ability to have it stop because we can't review it. We don't have that type of guideline to really authenticate that building process. The voluntary seems to be a pretty good way to go.
Rick, could you give a more concrete example of somebody proposed something that they thought represented a green approach, and that the absence of a voluntary code, the absence of these standards, that we had to tell them you can't do that?
Well, reuse of some materials sometimes takes additional testing and such. In many cases it does, whereas if we can use the original design standards for reuse in building components, we have a lot of people. The last wooden barn in Will County was constructed in the 20s. And what they're doing now is they're harvesting these barns and wanting to reuse them in a structure. If you use today's spans and today's different specifications, it's nearly impossible because you have old growth lumber and many times a hardwood, walnut, oak, and you're gearing it to pine or something on that order, or blue lambs. It's something more such that we could look at this and say, okay, well, we're reusing these materials. We can look and see what that material's ability to carry was and go forward with that. That's just a reuse. Now, if we're looking at other sustainable areas, we look at different roof systems that encapsulate styrofoam that will have various panels associated with them, so that we have the ability to say, okay, well, you can put this on without having to tear the thing apart or drill a hole to make sure everything is there. It fits into this category. It's a SIPS panel. It's just a styrofoam insulated panel with plywood either side, but you have no idea what the R factor is unless it's branded some way.
So this would allow, just if a private market, individual property owner, out of their own free will, said, I want to do this, the fact that we'd have this in the code would make a greater likelihood that we'd be able to say yes rather than no.
Absolutely.
One other thing that might be of interest is that green construction code, and being voluntary, I think, is a great way to go to start out. But what you can be confident is that when a contractor comes in and he says, I want to build an office building green. The people that are going to go in and out of that office building and work in that office building can be confident that it's going to be compatible and up to all the other ICC codes. It's going to be compatible with the fire code, the building code, the mechanical code, the energy code. And another thing, if they put a lot of solar panels on the roof, just going out and haphazardly putting solar panels on the roof can be a big problem for the fire guys if there's a fire, because they don't know, is it charged, what's going on? The fire code is going to be compatible with the green building code to make sure that when these guys get up on the roof, they're going to be safe. So it's more than just being green.
We've heard the ICC portion, we've got the down-to-earth portion, we've got numerous things that fit in this that we really have no way of measuring, but it's basically how do the home builders feel, how do the residents feel once again. We do have some comments. We do know it's long-term payback, usually in a residential form. Commercial seems to be more okay because there too, they can do the green roofs, and we've been on so many of them that have vegetation. There's ways here of actually measuring and what you do and what various articles are that are used that are compatible and compliant. So this gives us that ability.
Ray, I read in the paper last week, my bank is a B corporation. It's a Green Choice Bank, and it's been using new types of materials to build their building. And apparently this is a brand new classification, a B corporation instead of a C corporation. And as a tax guy, I've never heard of it before, and I haven't had a chance to research it. It just came out the last couple of weeks.
And you've got me at a disadvantage with that as well. We do have different types of building. I mean, the commercial code cites everything from non-combustible all the way to, a combination and then combustible, where we can go through, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types of buildings. But that one I would have to see more into the green section to see what types of rating that they're using for that. Bob, are you aware of anything in the ICC?
I'm not aware of anything.
Good? Okay. Just wanted the camera to go someplace else. But we have these comments. Has anybody else got anything else? I do know that it may not be. But I'd certainly like to be there if it is. I'd like to be able to look at it and say, it meets it. So we will bring this back, I think, from what I'm hearing tonight, that we can look at possible adoption, as long as it stays voluntary, which we have no plans for to do anything other than that. Even in areas that have adopted, and I believe there's only one other that's made it mandatory, all the other adoptions have been voluntary.
Dallas just adopted it, and I think it's mandatory. This is fairly recent.
Dallas is in what part of Illinois?
That would be Dallas, Texas. But where it is adopted, and I think it's mostly voluntary, Maryland, Rhode Island, Oregon, Florida, Boynton Beach, Florida had a separate adoption of the code, Richland, Washington, Keene, New Hampshire, there's a township in Arizona, Fort Collins, Colorado, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona, North Carolina, and Dallas. So,
Anyway, just one thing, I don't think there should be any incentive in the permits, because due to this being new and the knowledge that you guys have right now, I think it's going to take you longer to make sure that they meet all of the codes. You're not going to be doing this every day, so it's going to take more time, which makes it more costly. Why should we then give an incentive? It's going to cost us more to review it.
Aptly put. That is an item for consideration without a doubt. Was there any more discussion on the green construction code? So what I'm getting right now is, it might not be common. Long-term for residential, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but it could be done nonetheless. Commercial, it's okay. And if we are looking at this, and we do ask for it to be ratified and placed in our county ordinance, it would be at no incentive, and once again, staying voluntary. Voluntary. Okay. Now, go to the sheet I think we've all been waiting for. Fire District Partnership. In this course, because the county board has never been involved before in our ordinance review, in our ordinance updating, but they've always been, hey, the county gives us the law, we enforce it, they get the heat because they've given us something that we've said is going to be great, and then we blame them because they've made these restrictions. In the course of this, we talked about, in our ordinance, we have a caption that says that the building official in each fire protection district becomes the fire prevention department for that particular district. And when we enforce the rules in unincorporated Will County, we enforce them to the strictest letter of each and every fire protection district. When I brought that before our subcommittee, there were some questions in that we rely on you to sign off any of our permits before we issue them. I mean, they're generally commercial, of course, but we do that, and as a matter of fact, what has happened in the past is because some of you are volunteers, some of you are fully staffed, some have one station, some have a number of stations. The equipment you have varies so much with each individual use that we partnered with you to make it more feasible so that what you did we would enforce, so that whoever you had in your district was what we felt was best served and safer by our partnership. Now, there was some thoughts on the part of the subcommittee of throttling that back or relinquishing that to make Will County stand alone. And I thought what it's best to do is to make sure that we air that and we get all the feelings on how the fire protection districts feel the current partnership is. And I've got to tell you that fire suppression plays big into this as well. As you know, although Will County is a urban county, it's still 75% zoned agricultural. So we do have distances, we don't really have private water systems or public water systems that feed our county, so that when we look at the suppression systems in 1- and 2-family dwellings within the county, we're looking at them having their own fire pump, having their own holding tanks and such. And when we brought this before the subcommittee, we were told that at this time that's not feasible in unincorporated Will County because of the distance we have to water sources and the additional cost given the environment and building that we have right now. So at that point, we excluded that from the 2012 codes as far as fire suppression for 1- and 2-family dwellings. Also, there's somewhat of a conundrum, and I've been in contact with the state's attorney's office because we don't know how this initially started, whether this was an intergovernmental agreement with every fire protection district on a part of the county, because to be honest with you, I've searched as far as I can't find a thing. But it's been very, very well received, and it's always been something we counted on in the building division, because you were the fire specialists, you were those that did the fire reviews on the drawings, and you knew what your systems had to be. So there was no kicking and screaming, especially in a commercial atmosphere, because for the most part, you're in these places yearly, and we find out a lot because of your inspections. But there still lies that ownership of the permit and where the actual responsibility lies. So I thought it best to bring that out to everyone so that we can hear about how you feel about your partnership is, if there should be some limits, if there is some encumbrance, and as well as if any of the subcommittee wishes to speak, to tell you their concerns as well, so that we can get this out, as this is a very important part of what we do. So I'm going to open it up now to anyone who wishes to speak. I'd only ask that if we just keep it to 3 to 5 minutes, if at all possible, so everyone's allowed to speak.
Before you open it up, I want to tell you from a county official standpoint, from a county board standpoint, my standpoint, is there's 39 different fire protection districts in Will County. So consequently, potentially, you have 39 different sets of codes throughout the county. And when I suggest, and we suggest as a committee that needs to be looked at, we need to understand it's not that we don't want your input, but we need a unified code for the entire county. So when they come, people can look and say, this is the fire code. So I want to make it clear, it's not that we're trying to necessarily infringe on your districts, but you just need to come up with, along with the county, one set of unified code, fire code. And if there needs to be some exceptions, we can discuss that But we're trying to get it basically a unified code, so when they come to the county, they see this is the fire code. Hopefully our partnership would continue. So it might take some work on your part to help us develop that unified code, so everybody's the same throughout the county. Unless we wanted to make a distinction between certain types of districts. I think you're also probably tanker districts, even though probably everybody carries their own water for every district, but some may be more dependent on that than others. So I want to make that clear. It's not, we're looking to try to make it better and more understandable and transparent for people. That's all. Just understand where we're coming from, so.
And I wanted to add on to what Jim was saying. Within Will County, we have all these different fire districts. Will County is ultimately responsible for all these permits that we're issuing and all the things that happen. So I want to see Will County sign off on all the building permits, not the various individual fire districts. That isn't to say that the fire districts aren't welcome to go out and inspect with our inspectors, but our inspector should be the one that signs off on it because we're ultimately the one that's responsible.
Okay. I'm here representing the Will County Fire Chiefs Association, and we prepared a statement that I want to read, for you. Good evening. My name is Larry Rauch. I'm Assistant Chief of the Frankfurt Fire District, and I've overseen the Fire Prevention Bureau for the past 17 years. Fire districts in Illinois operate under the Illinois Fire Protection Act and have the responsibility to provide fire protection for fire hazards to residents and property in their jurisdictions. Under this act, fire districts have the authority to adopt and enforce ordinances related to fire prevention and fire management. The previous chief building official met with fire officials several years ago to discuss their concerns. And all of us, we got together and we worked and created a more efficient program between all the agencies. Mr. Sipliski became the chief building official. He continued to work with the fire officials to make improvements on the working relationship between the county and the fire district code officials. And Ray, we want to thank you for that, for continuing that, not just shutting us out. Over these many years, we've worked well together for the benefit of the communities by providing the best service and a safe working environment. The Fire Prevention Bureaus of Will County have enforced the fire codes we've adopted by the fire districts. The Will County building officials have worked with the districts by granting occupancy to only those occupancies that have met all the code requirements for both the county and the fire districts. So we both sign off on it. It's not just one of us, because the building officials sign off on the building construction and we sign off on the fire and life safety issues. The fire districts enforce their adopted fire codes, and the building officials have not approved the building permit until our requirements are met, and we thank them for that also, for working with us and making sure our requirements are met. Fire districts have also worked with the county building officials by being your eyes and ears out in the county, because there's been numerous times, we've contacted the building department, to let them know that we found a business that's operating, that is or has been open without a building permit or submitting any plans. The Will County Fire Chiefs Association is willing to meet and discuss the concerns of the Will County Building Department officials so we can continue this good working relationship that we have had these past years. We urge the Will County Building Department to continue to support, assist in working with the Fire Prevention Bureaus for the safety of our communities. They deserve this level of service. In addition, we'd like to mention that the fire districts have an excellent working relationship with land use, code enforcement, and the health departments. And we hope that continues also. I want to thank the Will County Fire Chief. I want to thank you for giving us, the Will County Fire Chiefs Association, the opportunity to address you tonight regarding our concerns in the future working relationship with the Will County Building Department officials and the fire districts. Like I said, we have had an excellent
working relationship with Will County. I attend a lot of meetings throughout the state, and I hear horror stories of other fire district officials, how they have to, how they work with their officials. And I just sit back and say, we don't have that problem. So I want to thank Ray and Bob, for working with us, and we hope it continues. Yes, sir.
Chief, I just have one question. It's come up in our committee discussions several times, but you mentioned enforcement. What's the mechanism that the Fire Protection District has to enforce the code?
Plans are submitted to the fire district through the building department. They have the builder, developer. We do strictly commercial and industrial. We don't do residential unless it's a residential fire sprinkler system. They submit their plans, we do a review, we send our review to the builder or the contractor and also to the county building department. When the building is in a spot where it needs to be inspected, we go out and inspect the fire codes, our review, make sure all our comments were met. And when it comes to the occupancy, we'll send a letter to the county. They've met all requirements, and we sign off on it. And we work with them. If they miss something, if it's life safety, we don't let it open. We'll ask the county to withhold the permit. But if it's something, an exit light needs to be fixed, we'll work with the occupant.
Essentially, you
enforcement
inspect, the enforcement is left on us, on the county, correct?
That's probably a gray area.
Who's the enforcement agency?
For the fire code, fire district.
And then what do you, if someone is outside the code, not meeting code, what action can you take against that business or?
Well, as Larry stated, the code process, how they deliver their plans to the various departments, they're already telling us that they're going to build their building a certain way. And then when we go out on our tests and inspections, we're just confirming that it is built to the way they said they built it. So if they're not building it in that manner, then we point that out to them, what deficiencies, and they have to correct it before they get approval.
Just as a hypothetical, we have a building owner business that's out there, Mr. Ballich's business, and he didn't get a permit, okay? And we come upon it, and he's in violation of fire code. Who enforces that?
Both agencies.
Well, the
what mechanism?
county building department, they will.
Yeah, but what if he doesn't have a permit?
They will put a stop work order out because he didn't submit plans to the county.
The enforcement still comes back to the county, correct?
We both cooperate on the enforcement.
Chief, I have a
What's the mechanism you enforce other than stopping
Us.
the permit?
We'll stop the job.
Say this job happened,
Okay.
and then they're in violation. Land use can go out and cite them for a code violation. What can you do?
Same thing.
You can cite.
We're our fire
them.
district attorney.
Right. So where I have a question is if we have the fire districts go out and enforce the fire code with Will County, who's ultimately responsible, and all the other codes are being enforced by our county inspectors, do we start saying, all right, we want the energy code agency to come out with and inspect for the energy code, and with our, make a deal, and the plumbing code, and each of these different codes that we have, do we have the specialists from each of those codes come out and enforce their rules the way they see it in behalf of Will County, who's responsible in the end? And that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm saying, I don't mind if the fire districts all come out and help our guys, but our guys are responsible unless we're going to bring in all these other agencies, which would be ridiculous. Our guys are qualified to do it all.
Let me just ask you, what you're saying is that the 39 fire protection districts that represent within Will County, you write 39 separate fire codes for the county.
I've got it, if I might.
Because I think the enforcement agency is the county. It's the county.
No.
All right, well then why are we even doing it? Why do we even have a fire code in the county? If the fire protection districts are gonna write their own codes, and you're gonna enforce 39 separate different codes within Will County, then why don't you just do it? Why are we doing it?
Well, if I could.
I'm not being argumentative.
No, let me,
But you
if
can't
I could-
have, you're
If I
telling
could
me
put it
that,
this way, they're an extra, it's like when we,
right, either
the-
we're the authority or we're not.
what I'm trying to do is, when we have something develop along the river,
I'm asking the question.
we also have to
Either
go
we
through.
are we are either the enforcement authority or we're not.
We
Which
are
is,
the enforcement authority.
who's the enforcement authority?
We are.
well, yes and
Okay.
no. You sign off on the final permit, but if we went to court on a local ordinance, it'd be the fire district.
That's correct.
So like if right now, if you did something, I'm Todd.
So if you didn't like our code, you would just take your own separate,
That's how it is
take your
now.
own separate action.
That's how it is now.
For the unincorporated part,
Unincorporated.
unincorporated.
Right, unincorporated.
They have the power to levy a fine of $750 per day, each day being a new violation.
Correct. Now, a lot of
Fire
us
district in and of itself. Now, the way that it's being done right now is the way that it's been explained, in that with cooperation from the county, until they get a sign-off from the fire protection district, doesn't grant the occupancy permit. And so that's the method that's being used right now. But if we refused or decided that we wanted to grant that occupancy permit, let's say that we don't agree with raising the standard or putting in a sprinkler system, and in fact, we gave them the permit, the occupancy permit anyhow, they would still be able to come in and enforce their ordinance against the homeowner by $750 fine per day. And so that's the ultimate control. They can't force us as the county of Will to withhold our permit. They can't force us to enforce that. But if we fail to, they have the ability to be able to enforce it themselves.
So let me ask you this. When you have different codes within municipalities and unincorporated areas within the same fire protection district, which do you enforce?
It's my understanding that and I'm not very schooled in this, but I defer to somebody else, but it's my understanding there's a uniform basic, and then that there may be some tweaking of that for each fire.
What goes beyond that?
Fire.
Can I just,
And I'm really just trying to get some uniformity within the county.
I made some notes throughout the entire conversation tonight, and I'd like to go through those points. I think I'll answer a lot of these questions if you guys don't mind. Just a second ago, I'm a little bit out of order here, because Ray made a comment about how Will County had to change a couple things in 2012. You're talking about pulling sprinklers out?
Yes.
On the model code?
Yes.
Okay. What you just said was you did that because Will County's a little different, because of the rural areas, right? And we had some problems with water supply and stuff like that. Well, the fire districts and some of the other municipalities do the same thing. Sometimes when we have something special, unique in our town, we do it special, unique to make it meet, because we're not the same as, like, Illinois is not the same as California and New York. Northwest Homer is not the same as Frankfurt. So we might have different things. Some villages want different type of residential type areas, multifamily, non-multifamily, high-rise, non-high-rise. So we all have to make a little bit of code changes to meet our stuff. What we talked about earlier was in our letter was when Steve Whitefeld and Larry Newling were at the county, they came to the fire districts and wanted to provide a one-stop shop for businesses and stuff to make it easier. So they come into the county and say, hey, listen, I want to build a whatever. Immediately, we would meet with them on a pre-con meeting or something like that, say, okay, you're gonna have to do this, this, and this, you need to have these fees, you do stuff like this, here's a problem, blah, blah, here's your plans. We get the plans from the county, we review them, we give them back to the county, so it's easier for the commercial person. We do that in all of our villages. We do that in our villages, our townships, our cities, we all do this. This makes it easier for the resident, makes it easier for the builder, makes it easier for everybody. So it kind of makes it easier. So that was another one of my points. Back we were talking about, way back at the beginning, about permits and giving a incentive for permits. The idea what you hit on before about the permits is correct. The permits help offset the cost of what it takes to go out there, do the inspections, do the plan review, take the person out there. Impact fees are the same way. Impact fees are designed to take the tax deferred time. So like your taxes are always paid a year behind. So if I have a commercial building come in, they're getting services from that town a year kind of in advance. So that's what those impact fees are for. So if the permit fees are too high,
you'd have to look at why are they so high? Are they actually taking that much services to do it? And then the people are, if they don't pay those fees, there shouldn't be a trade-off because you're still doing the work. So somebody else is absorbing that fee, so that's why they're there. When you talked earlier about crossing the street and the codes change, some of the things we did, I'm going to talk for Northwest Homer because that's where I'm from, years ago, and it's one of the things we did with the county with Steve Waterfeld and Larry Newling was Lamont, Northwest Homer, and Lockport got together and we had the same fire code. We did it simple. And we worked with the county on this too. So we did that. When you talked about, and I'm going to take a quote out of here, there's really no reason to build anything beyond the minimum code. When have we told our children or our family or our wives or our husbands, hey, it's great, you did the least you could, you're good. You know, we've never done that. So sometimes you always want to do your best to make things better for your community. So doing the minimum, I always think is kind of, okay. We talked about technology gets better, codes get better. You want to keep your town visible and viable. You want to be, hey, we got a good town. You don't want a town, man, they got a lot of fires. They got crappy construction. Their houses are always on fire. They're always burning down. They look like crap. You know, residential codes, maintenance codes, all this stuff's out there to help keep your town fresh and viable. Hey, listen, we got a fresh town. Man, this town is new. You know, they don't have a lot of issues. Their buildings are strong. They're tall. They're big. They're beautiful. You know, many times in our village, you always compare to other towns to the north. We could be like so and so. We don't want to be like so and so. Well, what do you want to be like? That's what you got to do. Some codes protect the people from themselves. When everybody gets that, don't quote me on them, use a name brand here, get the little orange Home Depot card in the mail, everybody's a contractor. So everybody thinks they can go out and do what they want. The problem is now if they do shoddy construction in your home, and you buy it, now you got shoddy construction, it's never inspected. But I agree with Steve, some permits are ridiculous, I do agree. Changing your hot water heater and stuff, but if a guy hooks his flue up wrong, he gets seal poisoning. Okay, then people could have a problem in their home. If you have water leaks, sometimes people make transition between copper and plastic. It leaks. You get mold. Now you don't know it's in the wall. Now the new person moves in, they get sick. They don't know. And why is it their fault? So that's something we got to think about too. And I can go on with those type of things. Building materials change over the years. So the building codes, like Ray was talking about, we're not having the same type of material, dimensional lumber. We're not having the glue lamp stuff. It's all changing. So codes have to evolve. We're not using wool and dimensional lumber anymore. Codes are generally passed because bad things happen, and that's why we change codes, and that's why code progression changes. So we always got to keep changing our codes and look at them. And again, I just think that if we look at anything, we got to look at our partnership, how we work together. And the final last thought was, when we have an issue, we work with the county because it's just easier. If the county takes us off the signature process of the permit, that's okay. But then the problem's going to come apart is you go to do your business and you're going up under construction, all of a sudden we show up and say, what are you doing? And you're going to get your building built, or you're in process, or you've already paid your architect to build it one way and you forgot something or missed something. Say sprinklers are required or not required. A lot of times when sprinklers are put in, there's a lot of good trade-offs in there. If you go ahead and build a building without sprinklers and then put sprinklers on top, you pay a lot more. If your architect incorporates the energy code, the accessibility code, you put all those together and marry them up, it's actually a better building and saves you some money. So a lot of times we come in together, we give them a good idea right up front, and it actually can save them money. And I know people are always worried about the big bad government coming. I mean, I don't like big bad government either, even though I'm part of it. But sometimes they're there to protect you. They really are. I mean, and I agree with Steve, there are some useless, silly things. I agree. But the partnership we have, I think, is too strong. There's 835 square miles in the county. I thought there was only 29 fire districts. I didn't think there was 39, but...
Greg told me 39. I'm not going to
It's actually 38 fire protection.
Is it? I thought it was 29, but okay.
It's 38.
But there are, just like there's, how many counties in the state of Illinois? There's 50 states in the union, so we all have different things. So you can always say, oh God, there's 50 states. We should have one code across 50 states. Oh my God, there's 100 counties in Illinois. We should have one thing. We can always do that. How many towns are there in Will County? We can always do that. So that's one thing about a government, how it's built and how it's tiered, is that we can go ahead and set our own rules and set our own laws that are for around here and what we need. You know, we might want something special. You know, so that's all I got to say. I know it's long-winded. I'm sorry, but I just want you guys to understand that we do have the enforcement authority. It just works really well with the county because it's one-stop shop. It's unified. We go in together. A lot of times what happens when you go on inspection, you guys have been on inspections, and you guys can attest to this, that the business owner will play
the inspectors against each other. Well, the county said I don't have to do that. And then we find out, oh yeah, no, that's not what we said. So we go in together, it works better. Saying that, well, the fire district said I can get away with that. And they're like, fire district has no authority to say that. And they know we didn't say that. But the business owner will pit us against each other all the time. So we try to go in together, we inspect together, we permit together, and we close the building together. That's how we get this.
I think if I could sum it, and Todd, you put it in, the fact that we've been trying to get across is that the fire protection districts have actually acted as a review and our inspector for that. And the fact of the matter is, we can go with our own fire code, but they are allowed as their own separate and completely intact entity with their own governing body to institute the rules within their fire protection district. If we don't enforce those, they can't. And the worst thing you want to have happen is someone begin a business, and while they're constructing, they come in and say, hey, where's this? And at that point, we're at a loss. We did and have, and hopefully will, always share this form that we have in one way, shape, or form or another. What I would suggest is, maybe not at this forum, because this is primarily input, but in more of a subcommittee and fire protection district format, that the subcommittee learn a little more about what the fire protection district offers and what its rules are, and the fact that there are some consortiums, which I was going to hit at before, that some of the fire protection districts have gotten together, and maybe it's a way that we can look to be a little more clear, less complicated to our citizenry. But it is one of those things, and we talk about ultimate enforcement. Yes, they have to go to their own legal and enforce those things and over the top of us. But what we've done to date is to make it all clear to somebody coming into Will County, okay, you're going to bring this building in. It's in this fire protection district. We want you to take the set of plans over there so you know going in what's going to be expected. So that if we had one fire code, they could still tweak it because their amount of equipment, their amount of drive time, their amount of ability to get to a water source changes from fire protection district to fire protection district. So that, you know, and I was in Coal City and Diamond today, meeting with a number of different fire protection districts that were all working together to get these problems solved. And I kind of use that as a parallel to what we do currently. Now, certainly we could discuss maybe getting a more uniform code, but they're still allowed to have what they have, and they can't enforce it beyond us. So I think we've got to learn a little more about that, and maybe...
Well, let me say this, Terry. Yeah, I still think we should have, you mentioned a number of fire protection districts got together, so you were, at least in that region, you had a kind of a uniform set of standards. And by the way, standards aren't minimum standards. I know people say these are the minimum. Doesn't mean it's the minimum necessarily. It's the minimum we're going to require. It doesn't mean it's the minimum that's in a code.
Well, if you adopt the codes, the family of codes that fire the building, you've made no amendments, that's the minimum.
You know, well, I'm just saying, it doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. I'm just saying that's not what we're necessarily talking about. We're talking about having a uniform code, regardless of what that is. And that's the part of the code we enforce. You know, this really came up over fire suppression being a part of the code, required code for residential. Is this something that the county's going to enforce, or is this something you're going to enforce if you chose to have it in your district?
If we chose to have it in our district, it's our responsibility to enforce it.
So
Yeah, when you say enforce, though, when you're talking about going to court with attorneys and a judge, it's a fire district responsibility that's over and above the county.
So you want to go over and above what the county does? That's your responsibility.
If we do, yes. All of our local ordinances would be our responsibility.
The one thing that brought this to head is the sprinklers discussion, and the fact that Manhattan is the only one that wants to enforce sprinklers in residential. Now, your group of fire departments, could you get together and decide whether it should be good for everybody in the county and overrule them so that we're all uniform? I think
the village doesn't have the code, and if we had the code,
I didn't know that the county is adopting the 2012 and removing
sprinklers, I didn't know that.
We're looking at it.
Because that's, you're tampering with the model code, that's like taking part out of, I was gonna say the Bible, taking something out of something that doesn't, you shouldn't take it out. It's like taking a part out of your car, you don't know what it does, because they all work together. So anytime you take a model code, see, in 2009, sprinklers were in the appendix, you can take it out, nobody really cared. But when you go to 2012, I shouldn't say nobody really cared. I apologize. I'm sorry, 06. We take it out of the appendix. It was kind of like, it's an addendum. But in 2012 and 2009, now you're tampering with something it's a unit. It all works together. So you take it out here, it might affect other sections of the code. Because when you have building codes, when sprinklers are put in, other things are lessened. Door closures, escape routes, window ratings, rafter ratings, floor coverings. A lot of things are all integrated, wall covering, stuff like that. So now if you took out a section, you'd have to beef up everything else around that section. So you gotta be careful when you take something out of a model code. Yeah, because it's all integrated. The residential code, the building code, the fire code, it all.
Are you saying that then they lessened the codes from last time of other the building materials and everything else because they're putting suppression in?
Possibly, I don't know, I haven't reviewed 2012.
They did?
Yes.
They did.
Yes.
So,
I know because I dealt with it.
Yes, you can't use, if you take away the sprinklers, you can't use lightweight construction methods that they use today. Your fire separations are gonna be different. Like you said, you're taking a key component of that code away, now you gotta look at all the other factors here that would not be allowed. But because they sprinkle it, they call them trade-offs or trade-ups, you're allowed. Complex is gonna have higher density. Fire separation isn't as great. You can use more lightweight construction, etc. The list goes on and on and on. But as Bob Neal explained, it's a model code and it's put together from all different factions. Architects, everybody looks at this code. When you take a piece of it, it's explained part of a car, but it's even more critical because now you have potential, you've reduced the integrity of that code.
Which I brought up to you.
We talked about that, but in Will County, in our ordinance, we do call for fire separation at a minimum between any tenant space, any apartment at 2 hours.
Per builder on.
So, no matter what happens, they have
Another
to.
example, you talked earlier about ISO. I'll tell you that you can check your ISO rep, and whatever your rating might be, and it'll vary in the different communities. But the building code evaluation grading system that ISO uses, they're going to come in and evaluate your building department. And when they figured out that you took this model code and you retracted sections, i.e. fire sprinklers, your grading is going to go down. That's going to translate in every one of your residents are going to pay higher insurance premiums. I guarantee it. Check with them. Very much so. And you don't realize that.
We're currently at a 4, and, which is a pretty good rating. And the reason we're at 4 is because we haven't gone to a 3-year, we've gone to a 6-year cyclical consumption. And we've done that just primarily because contractors have a difficult time every 3 years trying to come up with codes. It's very costly and it does present problems and some continuity. Because you can see that we're looking at 2012 codes that will be adopted in 2014. And the 2006 codes that were adopted actually they were adopted in 9, but not enforced till 10, which was January 1. So, we do understand that. We do have our minimums as far as fire safety and fire separation, so that's going to be there to extend no matter. But, there is the question of viability, and we put it before the subcommittee, and we're working with their concerns. Now, tonight, they have other things to consider, and we'll continue to work with this. But we're rushing through trying to hopefully get this passed so that we could put in force January 1 of 14. That is not going to happen.
Well, you're looking to retract critical features of the code. I think you need to sit back and reevaluate this. I talked about this ISO, but the other thing you need to look at too is, do you have any flood areas in Will County? Sure you do. That will be impacted too. Your flood insurance will be much higher if you retract from the model codes. That also evaluates through ISO, the building code evaluation grading system, and the National Floodplain Insurance Program. All your rates will be much higher. You can validate this through sources, but I'll tell you right now.
You relax the code, but it has to do with something of a measured flood level, of a studied area, you put yourself in peril, and the codes speak highly against that. And we in land use have our engineering department to rely on to make sure that anything that occurs there either isn't built or it's built properly with the proper compensatory storage, so that you take the hydraulic profiles as well as the hydraulic shadows that are occurring with the various impediments that you're putting in there, and develop an elevation, 3.5 feet, and then a freeboard of 2 feet above that. So we do that in another section of our land use department. Whenever you look at a model code, which we've looked at many, and we've seen them come over the years, and you go back and say, well, it was a suggestion in 6, it's more of a, hey, you better do it in 9, and now it's here. Is that an evolution, or is it finally just sort of, we've gotten to this point, we've eased you into it, and this is what it is? And I can say, I mean, from both sides, I'm looking at this because we've stayed as impartial as possible by not pushing one or another on it. But there are the clear and hard facts that many, many people are not building these days. And the few that are building as not frugally, but as mindfully as they can. And if they don't absolutely have to do something, they don't. Now, you know, we look at various structures that are 1 story and go on and on and on, long ranches. And we have egress windows, and we have smoke detectors, and we have CO detectors. You know, we look at the viability of that out in the middle of 10 acres on an estate residential with the nearest water supply miles and miles and miles away, and say, okay, how viable is this? You know, chances are these people are going to get out through the windows, and they have the immediate ability to do so. Now, we don't know there's a lot of 2 stories. We know there's a lot of these factors that come into play. And I'm never going to say that sprinkler systems don't save people. It's just a matter of the economics that we're faced with now and some of the other safety precautions that we're trying to build into it. And look at possibilities of legacy building like they used to with lath and plaster as a retardant versus today's lumber. We've gotten some new TGIs that have been coated and actually have a burn rating better than ancient forest lumber and don't require the half-inch beneath them for our fire rating. We will make every equitable change to make sure that fire separations will never be compromised, sprinklered or not. But by the same token, I do understand your position.
So are you saying that all 39 districts are adopting fire suppression?
I can't speak for fire districts.
Manhattan is, I think Elwood.
Jason didn't know what adopt was called.
We're everything except 1 and 2 family, and that is coming in.
And that's, we're going to do the same thing in the next update.
All of 38?
I'm just talking Frankfurt, I can't say.
Yeah, we can't
all
speak for the other
38.
districts
But if
that
we
aren't
wanted
here.
to, I'd
No.
imagine if we got together, all 38 would change.
What I'm saying is if all 38 are, why do you care what we're doing? If you're all going to do it, because we're enforcing your codes.
We just wanted to make things simpler.
Is there a point when we're going to use cinder block walls 3 foot above the roof for every wall in the home, so that it's completely fire safety?
Well, see, we're going to.
I'm just asking the question.
Practical.
I mean, well, some of these fire, sprinkler systems could cost up to 10 grand. And to do a house, because when you go to sell the house, if it's not up to code, you're not going to be able to sell the house. So my question is, are we going to start doing it where we go to cinder block walls, no fires? Maybe we get volunteer fire departments then.
They do the annual inspections every year of the system.
We have a question.
I just want to point out a couple of basic facts about a residential sprinkler system, because when I hear a comment like that, I just want to make sure people understand what a residential fire sprinkler system is. I'm Peg Paul, and I'm the communications manager with the nonprofit Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, a national organization. Most of my funding comes from FEMA Fire Act grants, and I happen to live in a sprinkler home in Frankfurt, so that's what brings me here tonight. An NFPA 13D system is specifically for 1 and 2 family homes. We're always fighting Hollywood when it comes to education, and I hope you know that each sprinkler is individually activated by heat. So the whole system never goes off. 90% of the time in a residential sprinkler, only one sprinkler, the sprinkler closest to that fire source, goes off. And so you don't need a major water source, because really a 13D system is designed for 2 sprinklers. So I'm a little concerned when I hear about rural systems, because when you're off of a municipal water supply, all you need is a 300-gallon tank, and that's enough water to supply 10 minutes to your sprinkler system so that everybody in the home can get out. And oftentimes, that's enough water to keep the fire small enough or put it out so that the fire department can get to that rural location, make sure everyone is out, and then put the fire out.
Where do those go? Where does those tanks go?
It goes in a basement or a utility area. It's part of the design of the house because we're talking only new construction.
You don't have to change construction to deal with that?
No.
If I can just make a point too about the tanks. I know it was brought up, Ray, about tank and pumps being the issue that maybe was dropped from the subcommittee. And Barrington, Long Grove, and several other communities allow the use of the well in the house to supply the water. They don't need the tank and pump. As long as, like Ms. Paul said, about 2 heads going off, they could do that. So men's communities already do that already. Well pumps, then you won't need the tank and pump. And now, your tank, if your well goes out, you know you're going to fix that thing right away if it goes out. You want your toilet to run, you want to wash your dishes, you want to do everything else. So it supplies that 15 gallons or that 28 gallons a minute that you need without doing the tanking run. Now, if you want to do a tank and pump, you can do it as a backup. And the NFPA codes allow that. So
The city of
that's my only
Crestwood
comment.
hasn't had a new home since they passed the sprinkler law.
When was
Crest Hill.
that?
One of the aldermen called me and told me that nobody wants to build it.
When was Crestwood passed?
No,
Because they-
Crestwood.
Crest Hill. Crest Hill.
3 years ago.
Well, I believe they also had no permits, it had nothing to do with it, it was the economy. Right, Mr. Josephs?
No, it's not it.
Well, there's 93 communities in Illinois that have passed it, and none of them have ever complained about not having a building being done because of the sprinkler system. So, what was that comment?
There's 1,800 that have it.
Okay, keep hearing that.
If you're required by law to have them from your fire district, you're gonna have to have them anyway. It's like Obamacare. You gotta get it, period, otherwise you pay a fine. Well, the same deal here, but do the people actually wanna pay that added cost? Do they see a value in it? You know, those are questions that
Well,
have to be
what they
answered.
do get, I just mentioned about, what they do get out of it, first of all, is peace of mind. But they do also, there is not an insurance company in the state of Illinois that does not provide an insurance rate to that person.
Do they cover when the water goes off accidentally?
That's 1 in 16 million at the most, and they make.
How many fires are there in the United States?
I'll let the fire
In the
people answer that,
homes?
but Illinois is
I know
86 fire deaths right now, up to date.
out of all the people in the United States?
Well, we can't argue that. If you're arguing that, just talk with the fire officials, because I think that's not an argument.
If I can just change the subject here a little bit. So, if it's not in the county codes, then it will be up to the individual fire protection districts to enforce that part of the code. Right? Right?
So if all the fire districts think it's green, then you'll all have it, right?
And you can enforce it.
We just asked, though, if you are going to keep the sprinklers out of 2012, that you go through every single line of the text and make sure that you reinforce the building code back to where it was, including floor joists, floor covering, wall covering, ceiling string, all that stuff. I think you're going to increase back the price of the house back to where it was, and you're going to it's going to be equal.
No, we understand this collateral. We understand this collateral, but one thing that we have done is try to plan for something of that nature. With the direction of the subcommittee, we try to make the other subsequent changes, which I believe are still going to be.
I live in a sprinkler hole. All 38 fire protection districts added in, then I think that would be different.
Well, I live in a sprinkler.
As long as these all don't have it in, I think it becomes more of a problem. So if you have 38 fire protection districts who adopt it, then I do think, since it's going to be enforced uniformly throughout the county, then I think the county perhaps is in a position to enforce it. But unless you all have it, I think it's very difficult for the county to enforce it. And I think that's on the fire protection districts then, for you to uniformly adopt it.
Just another quick last comment. I live in a sprinkler home also. When I built my home, the sprinklers I thought were going to be expensive also, so I realized how it wasn't. When I got the price tag, My house was a little more, because I sprinkled more. It was a single home, it wasn't a group of homes. My cost of my house would have been almost $2,000 less with the sprinklers if I would have had it done in a whole subdivision, it was cheaper. But when I saw that my garage was $10,000, they had a third-car garage, and my sprinklers were only $8,000, and that was including, I added a lot more than was required. It would have been a $5,600 job probably in my house, but I went a little over and above. I did it because to upgrade the carpeting in my house would be $2 a square foot is $1.80 for my sprinklers, and that was because I increased my coverage. It's even less instead of it. So the price, people get scared when they see the price, but when you compare it, and the sprinkler people can give you a lot better prices nowadays than I can give you off the top of my head. But if it's integrated in your home and the technology has changed so much with the piping, and my house is still done in partial steel, the codes have changed so much going to plastic and a different type of flexible tubing, it's so much different now. It's more cost effective. People get scared, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. Sometimes it's technology they don't understand. Just like people don't like cell phones and computers and iPads. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. We had a dryer fire the other day, it was a dryer fire. The gentleman just got his family out of the house. He went around the back of the house. Immediately after he got his people out of the house, he went to the meeting place, pulled his garden hose and tried to put out the fire himself, couldn't get back into his house. So that was probably another minute maybe. He got around the side of the house, 2 minutes tops. That's all he had extra. He would have got out. So, I mean, sometimes when these fires go, you don't have time, and say smoke detector, yeah, they do a great job. But sometimes if a fire gets big enough, you don't have time to do anything else. And if your family's not together and all upstairs in the bedroom, you can't get them out, it could be that risk. And I know people say it's not going to happen to me. Just like tornadoes aren't going to hit Coal City, it doesn't happen to me, but it did. Building department, you guys have those little tiny brackets you put on the rafters now for the wind lift on the roofs. Makes a huge difference. Whoever thought that stupid little piece of metal would make a huge difference? And little things like that, you don't realize. Sprinkler systems are small compared to your house, and it makes a big difference.
That's what I still don't understand what Jim said and what I said. If you guys are so in favor of it, then, I mean, why is it our job to create a code? We're enforcing your codes now. And if you all think it's great, and all 38 of you agree, then you just put it
A lot
in.
of us know that 2012 is coming, and the code, it's in the model code. So we're expecting that to roll in just like it would. It's code change time. A lot of us are in 2006. And what Ray says, usually you go on a 3, it's 3 or 6 or like that, and we're figured, a lot of people skip the 3 and go to the 6. This would be the natural, normal time to implement the next modern thing, and that's what we were expecting.
But I don't think we need to be ahead of the fire protection districts. You need to adopt it, all the districts, so that we can uniformly apply it throughout the county. Does that not make sense to you?
I guess I would have to then ask them, why wouldn't the county just adopt the 2012 code as it is and not amend out?
It's your fire protection code.
And not amend out the fire.
Well, why wouldn't the 38?
Then we're in unison, everybody. The fire districts all have to act independently. Can't the county set the example here? You've already got it. This is the trend. You're hearing this.
Well, maybe you guys could take our trend and not make their
Well,
ordinance include them.
I want to hear for all 38 fire protection districts. Let's see what they're going to do. I mean, is that unreasonable? I don't need, you want me to dictate to the protection districts with the code? Or do you want their codes to come to us?
Well, county chiefs have a meeting Monday, this will be brought up. And so we can probably have an answer for you Monday at 11 o'clock.
You know, Larry, I'm looking just for uniformity here. I don't want something to apply to one part of the county and not the other. I want to make sure the fire protection district draws.
Which is the way it exists now.
But you're gonna adopt the 2012, take the sprinklers out, but you want us to...
So we may not adopt anything in the code. I don't know. I mean, you're making the assumption we're gonna adopt the 2012 codes.
Well, that's
I'm not so sure
what's behind you.
that's the case. I mean, we're talking about adopting.
But that's the part I don't understand as a resident. Then why would Will County adopt a code and take something out of that code? That's what I'm not following.
Do they not? Do they stay at the 2006 code?
Why is it even something you're talking about taking out?
Because the home builders and the construction people say it's too expensive for people to build houses.
It's funny, California is starting their 4th year with a statewide requirement of residential sprinklers for 1- and 2-family homes. The home builders report a 155% increase this year in home building. That's California. But the fact is, if you check with the home builders, their home price, it has not in any way hampered new construction in communities that require residential sprinklers.
Well, we have home builders over there, anybody got it?
I got one question. You have sprinklers in your house? You have sprinklers in your house?
None of my house.
Are any of you guys on a well? What's the difference in cost? And this is from the NFPA, and it says dollar something a square foot, $1.35 a square foot.
It's closer to
Is that
$2. Closer to $2 here.
Oh, okay, but is that cost comparable whether you have a well or you have city water? Is it apples and apples, or those apples and oranges, those numbers? Because everything I read, even that you guys put out, that the sprinkler fitter sent me, was about residences that are in incorporated areas where they have city-supplied water supply. I'm not saying one way or the other, whether it's good or bad. I'd just like to know, is it apples and apples, or is all the stuff that is getting put before us for residences in an incorporated area?
I do work with fire departments and communities across the country. And as you mentioned, California and Maryland are the two states that require sprinkler systems in all new construction at the state level. New home built in California or Maryland has to have sprinkler in new construction. And no, it's not apples to apples. If you are on a water supply, a town municipal water supply, that is the most cost effective. But the price of having to go with a tank and a pump could add $1,500, $2,000. We're talking, like I mentioned earlier, 300 gallons is what you need to meet the standard, the 13D standard, to have enough water supply to protect the life safety in that home. But if you have an adequate well, it's just making sure the pump is enough, which usually that cost is more in line, apples to apples, with the municipal setup.
Bigger pump, bigger riser, deeper well, maybe?
Yeah.
Two?
Yeah, but keep in mind,
You don't have a tank.
the standard requires enough for 2 sprinklers, which is 15 gallons per minute.
Right.
So we're not talking a lot of water for a sprinkler
They've been
system.
finding out those
Instead of
wells.
being a half horsepower, we're talking about a horse and a half.
It may not. I've heard that they've basically been the same because they only have to supply the 15 or 28 gallons a minute, which, it's not much water compared to
I think
your underground sprinkler system or whatever.
I think that 15.
And I'm just talking from Barrington along Grove and the towns that do it. And the other item is that when you do that, you don't need the backflow preventer, which saves you about $500 over the installation.
Comment in the back?
Yeah, Chairman, thank the members of the subcommittee. Tom Joseph with the Illinois Association of Realtors and Three Rivers in Main Street. In referencing California, I think that's a very, very sensitive and extreme example because you have the Santa Anita winds, you have fires that ravage that Southern California region and other parts of that state, and obviously it's a very, very serious situation. Thank God we do not face that kind of environment here locally. In reference to the cost on a municipal water hookup with sewer and water, the Illinois Association of Realtors did a study in conjunction with the home builders industry, and on average for a 3,000 square foot home, you're looking at about $10,000 on top of the cost of a new construction home. You're looking at $10,000 in sprinkler associated costs. You have to also keep in mind that the sprinkler heads have to be inspected on a yearly basis. They're very sensitive and they need to be maintained. So there's a lot of additional things that factor into this. When you're talking about well water, you're obviously talking about a few $1,000s. I appreciate the quote that was shared here because I had personally not been able to identify that, but you're looking at roughly between maybe $1,500 to $2,000, maybe a little more. But there's going to have to be some sort of maintenance involved of that water supply system. I think someone else suggested that there's going to have to be some sort of backup system to that system as well. I mean, you're going to continue to have to, factor in some sort of safe harbor to try to get to some sort of safe point, which in the end no one can answer in any kind of specific exclusivity. So, we understand the sensitivity of the issue, and we'll be glad to work with the county board. But ultimately, this is a builder and buyer choice issue when it comes to single-family and multifamily units, and that's where it should stay. And you should respect the will of the people on that. Thank you.
A comment in the back?
I agree with him 100% what he just said.
Yeah, the backup generator for the well.
I was just gonna say, even if we leave it up to the builder and the homeowner, I think there still needs to be a code that it's expected to when it's installed. I'm not comfortable if we were to have somebody install a sprinkler system in a house and run garden hose in the attic and say it's a sprinkler system, I'm not done with it. You still need to have some kind of code to expect it to. My experience with contractors and your experience with contractors, Joe, may not be the same.
No, but just if I may interject, just since you're responding to my point, it's as it was identified, it's the FPD 13D outline. It's a very specific outline. It has to be done with very specific specificity and with the highest technology and with the highest craftsmanship. A builder is just not going to allow someone just to come in and put up a couple of wires or hoses. It has to be inspected, as has been validated here. It has to be verified and validated here with inspection. So no one is just going to put up in a couple of hoses.
Well, that's because there will be a code to expect it to.
No, but that's the point. It's a very, very specific outline that has to be followed.
I just want to point out that I had the opportunity to sit on a committee. It's the Fire Protection Research Foundation. They've done 2 studies now, one in '08, and we just released one in September 11th. And this was a cost assessment. The first time we looked at 10 communities, and a couple were communities here in Illinois, but they were across the country. And the study we just released was a study of 20 communities, and some of those communities were located in Lake County, Illinois. And we were just looking at where sprinklers were required and what the total cost would be to the builder, and that included permit fees, anything related to the installation of sprinklers. And originally in '08, it came out to $1.61, and now this is a national average per sprinkler square foot. It actually came down a little bit when we looked at 20 because of more sprinkler codes throughout the country. Now, as Tom mentioned, here in Illinois, because of union labor costs, it is a little more expensive. It's closer to about $2 a square foot. So there are different reasons for it. So I just wanted to point out, when I heard 10,000 per system, that's just not the case. And I want to point out who else was on this committee. It was, like I said, the Fire Protection Research Foundation. We had someone from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We have a builder on the committee. We had MRAP from the National Association of Home Builders on that committee. We had Jeff Hyde from State Farm. We had a sprinkler contractor on the committee, Dennis Gensel from the U.S. Fire Administration, Tommy Hoover, the State Fire Marshal from California, Bruce Johnson from the ICC, Gary Keegan from the Global, and also a water municipality person from California who was part of California passing the code at that level. So there are a lot of different people who were stakeholders in different parts of that code who were on this study. And it is available. You can go to NFPA's website and download it if you want to take a look at it. But it's good information about the cost of systems when people are claiming it's $10,000 or more.
I was gonna ask Tom, maybe, what's the average cost per square foot of a new construction home in Will County? $102, $105, what is it?
I'd yield to Bill on that.
It all depends on what community that's in, but I'd say it could be anywhere from $100 to $120. But I would, as president of the Illinois Home Builders Association, I completely disagree with her study that she went back out forward. Those prices were absolutely skewed, and the cost is substantially higher. You're way above the $250 to $350. Just in the southern suburbs, we had over 8 contractors turn in different pricing, and the least expensive pricing on one of the homes that were mentioned was $9,800. And then with the mandatory options of electrical, insulation,
that has to be installed to make sure that those lines, don't freeze. And then the additional carpentry works that's necessary to box those in. It's not as easy as everyone is discussing. Homes have never been built safer than they have today. Fires are dropping at not a slight rate. They are dropping at an absolute clip. And that is also because of these people here. With their teaching, with their teaching to the communities, setting up programs in the communities, fire deaths are absolutely plummeting. I think the last record that I actually seen is that in all housing, fatalities are less than 0.35% of all existing homes. Of that 0.35%, 0.83% are fatalities. Most of the fatalities occur in one room or two rooms because you can't protect people against themselves. It's because of smoking. It's also because of cooking utensils that will always be there. But in the last 20 years, they haven't been just slowly going down. They have been plummeting down because of the industry, the home builders, and because of the fire protection districts and their hard work in educating everybody that's involved.
And we keep it down to better codes.
Right, and going back to the codes, when they say minimum are phenomenal codes. This isn't like we're trying to buy a minimum pair of shoes. When they say you got to use 2x10s to span a 12-foot span, okay, that's the minimum. But you can do a dance on a live floor load that's above it. So when people use minimum, I think they use it for their own benefit in the discussion. But I think the main point that we all should be talking about is technology. Okay, deaths are going down because of smoke detectors, and they're going down because of carbon monoxide detectors, and they're going down because people are allowed to put them in their home and they're wired direct. People get calls on their phones today. If their alarms go off, if their heat sensors go below 65 degrees, the carbon monoxide detector, of which went off in my own house, and the fire department was over at my house in about 8 minutes from after I got the call. It was a defective unit. Okay, but the unit was also 18 years old. I was very happy that they notified me of it and do it, because those are the deaths that can occur. Fire sprinklers aren't the only reason or the only way to do the protection.
Right, because how many other homes in unincorporated Manhattan do not have sprinkler systems? How many homes are there in the township? 500? They don't have sprinklers.
Here's the question that I would like to really put forward, is that really of all the fires that occur, and I have two close relatives that are Chicago firemen, and so I hear the grisly stories and everything that occur, but predominantly fires are occurring in older homes, homes that are 60 years or more old, homes that the piping was really gas piping, because that's how you used to light the house, and then they ran cloth wires in it, and the substandard electrical systems that are put into that. Now we're talking about sprinklers for new homes, of which have very little problems whatsoever in nationally. Why are we talking about the homes that people are living in all of our inner cities over here in Joliet that are over 50 years of age? No one's talking about putting more smoke detectors in those homes, carbon monoxide detectors in those homes, or how about putting sprinkling detectors in those homes, and multi-family homes that are over 50 years of age? Why aren't anyone discussing those where all our deaths and our tragedies are happening?
Actually, we do a lot of retro in the older homes and older buildings. We try doing that in a lot of cities. We get a lot of resistance from that. And we get a lot of resistance from that because of the cost. People don't want, we had the high-rise sprinklers.
Isn't that why we just had this debate when the state fired the marshal?
Yes. Right, but when you're talking about doing old stuff, we tried sprinkling stuff in the city of Chicago. We tried sprinkling stuff. We get turned down all the time because of money.
Okay, so it's not like we're not trying. Also too, when you're talking about the houses that are 50 years old, those homes are built to the code of the time. Just like now, we're building the homes to the code of the time. And then 50 years from now, people are gonna say, holy cow, look what they did back then. So those houses, the Chicago bungalows are built to the code of the
I
time.
look back is that, and I've been in this business my whole life, and my adult life of 38 years. And I remember in the late 70s, they came out with the smoke detectors. And my father and several other guys put them in because they thought they were a great idea. And at time they were only battery operated, you know. And then I'd say about, it had to be 5 or 6 years, a lot of the municipalities said, here, let's put these detectors next to the furnaces, hot water tanks. And again, at that time, those were Class B fuse or even less. I mean, some they were going into clay, you know, chimney fuse that were going in there. And that made a tremendous difference. And then after that, they said, let's make that to be wired. Now you look back at those same homes where, say, fires and stuff are occurring is because we can't get the maintenance on those small little fire detectors, smoke detectors, that were in homes 35, 38 years ago. And we haven't been able to come up with a process to make sure that these older homes, these homes that are 40, 50, 60 years, why can't they not have smoke detectors? Why can't they not have detectors which are simple units that are standard operating procedure in a single-family home? But why, that should be the predominant discussion of how should we be able to do that and how, as a society, we should be able to fund that. Not on a brand new single-family home now with the energy code. We got 90% efficient furnaces that we're taking almost the heat and a lot of the destruction that's in the homes out of them. Why don't we have a discussion that we have to have a certain type of rug? Why don't we have a discussion that we have a certain type of paint or a tile floor? But no, we have a discussion on putting a sprinkling head, which is 120-year-old technology, instead of like ADT, Infinity, and all these other companies are putting these wire systems in that if your light is on too long, it comes up on your phone, which is new modern technology. And I am not going to speak anymore, but that's what really disturbs me.
Yeah, first, let's try and, we talked about talking for 3 to 5 minutes. We've got a lot of experts here tonight, and the panel, I'm sure, would like to get the information, ask the questions of the experts while we got them in the room. I would ask somebody from that's in favor of the sprinklers, that knows about the sprinkler systems, what the inspection, you know, we've heard that the heads have to be inspected every year. Before you start, let me finish. Does there have to be a vacuum breaker in the domestic water supply line that has to be inspected every year by a licensed plumber? What goes on here? What has to be inspected and what is just conjecture doesn't have to be inspected?
So it's okay if I speak? Tom Leah from Northern Illinois Fire Sprinkler Advisory Board. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to speak and be here, and would like to offer the opportunity for any of the fire departments when they have one of their houses that they're going to burn down during a training event where we do a sprinkler room and a non-sprinkler room and invite the committee out. If that could be done when anybody gets a permit, you know, maybe work it out and communicate, because I think you need to see what happens with the fire and how a sprinkler operates, and we can do that easily. So I'd just like to throw it out on the table. I'd like to provide some information from FEMA, the United States Fire Administration. I'll leave some folders off when I'm done. And I'd just like to comment, you know, NFPA 13D is the standard for the code, and it does not require any type of electrical hookup. Those are all power, those are all options. So if you go with the basic NFPA 13D, which we all recommend, the minimum standard, don't add anything to it. And we encourage any of the 94 towns that did it not to add any options to the standard. Keep it out of there. And then just to correct a misstatement too, where the sprinklers do not have to be inspected annually.
every 20 years, according to the standard, you have to take a head off and sample it. So every year, the homeowner simply can go down and turn the valve, goes into the sump pump, water flows into that, that's it, it's done. According to NFPA 13 and any of the other codes, that's out there. So there's no cost to the homeowner. There is a cost to the backflow preventer if they have one. And if you have a reduced pressure zone device, or if you have a double detector check, you can start at $50 for that. And it could go up. It depends on what type of inspection and plumbing inspector that you get. If you get a contract and you have a replacement type contract, you could go, it could be up to $100. But if you simply have them come out and test it, like you do with your underground sprinkler system, that's what the cost would be.
So, just so everybody understands, if you have a lawn sprinkler system that has the same device, it has to be inspected annually. Also.
Correct.
They're supposed to.
Generally, yeah, and I agree. And generally, if you're getting 5 to 20% on your insurance, I get $195 a year, so my actual test, I'm still making on it. Now, I'm not looking to make money, and it's not going to make money for you. It would take 20 years to pay it back. A commercial system is much more easily paid back than a residential system, but that's the basics for it. So I simply want to leave it at that. I'd like to leave your report, have you look at it if you could. Just address your decision that, we read in the paper that you dropped the 13B from your code. It was in the paper stated that way, and that's why we're here. We were just concerned how the decision was made, and maybe the decision was made without all the information that was available. So I want to be able to provide that to you before you go, so that you could look at it for your next meeting. And that's simply it. I'm available for questions and other information. I'll leave it at that.
If you guys are meeting, or you guys, like Larry said, the Will County Chiefs have a meeting next Monday, would the committee be able to come up with a list of questions that you guys have for us? Or Tom, whoever, that if you guys could come up with a list of the questions you have for us, why this code, why not that code, and get it to us by Monday, and then at our meeting, we can get an answer for you guys and get it back to you.
Let me ask, on Monday, you're gonna have all 38 fire districts in Will County there, so are you guys all gonna vote to adopt the code?
No.
Why not?
We haven't had that much time to talk about it. This just came out in the paper.
There's a lot of work done when you change codes. There's a
You're asking us to do it, and you guys are the experts.
Are you changing yours Monday?
No.
How are you going to change ours?
So we're not gonna change ours till you do. We'll wait for you, Larry.
Okay. And I think the only other thing is...
You guys are the experts.
We'll wait to get it.
Well, that's what I'm asking, if you guys have questions, I think the underlying theme is that there's a question as to whether or not legally fire districts have any say-so in doing this. And I think, Tom, I'm not a lawyer,
Yeah,
but
I agree with what you said.
in the recent decision with Lake County versus what kind of fire district, the state of Illinois, the state Supreme Court said that the fire districts do have the authority to enforce their code in the unincorporated areas of the county. So I think that answers the question.
We accept that.
We don't really need to be here.
But
You guys make
we
the
want to
rules
work with
anyway,
you,
so-
Steve, I think you're missing the point. We want to work with you, but if you guys have questions, give us what the questions are, and we can certainly get back to you guys with, some answers.
No, I agree, but I didn't realize that you guys are the ultimate authority on it. So, you guys enforce whatever's in your jurisdictions. So at that point, like Jim said, having one uniform, that's what we want. But whether we want it or not, it doesn't matter, because each one of the districts can do what they want anyway.
Comes out, who's gonna enforce it? If your code's more restrictive than the county code, then you would have to enforce your part of the code that's not ours.
That's what we have, we have the attorneys, and then we have the authority then to take.
So if we talk about fire suppression, sprinkler systems, if it's not in our code and it's in your code, then it'll be up to you to enforce it. But if it's uniform, then it's easier for us to enforce it as a county. I'm really just looking at the county to have it something that we apply uniformly throughout the county.
That would be a great approach. That would be an intergovernmental agreement between the fire districts and the county and all of that.
I think we already have it.
We already have it, that's what we're doing now, basically, even if it hasn't been officially done.
Include that, and everybody's on the same
That's in
page.
practice, that's what we've been doing.
Well, I don't even see us having a choice. If we say we don't want sprinklers and you guys say you want them, we gotta live with it, according to what I'm being told. So, it's like a waste of time to even discuss it here. It's up to you guys.
I think we'd rather have it come from you than us going to you, we'd rather have you bring it to us.
I think as far as going to your meetings, maybe Ray, if you could send somebody, you know what our feelings are, and you're more technically involved than what we are, so.
Be happy to carry all of your questions, and if I could be invited to that meeting, I would sit and listen and try to express the concerns as best I could.
Comment, it just bothers me to me to hear some of the comments made. I spent 38 years in the fire service, just recently retired. I have to tell you, fire does not discriminate. Old home, new home, anywhere. And the fact is fire sprinklers are designed for life safety first. Secondary, there's some property conservation to it. But when the fire department's here to do a side-by-side or a demonstration, I think it's very convincing when you see the difference. As far as water leaks, things like that, usually they were installed wrong. And contractors are getting better at it now, as far as installing proper insulation. We have differences here up in our area with the climate. It's a little bit different in Phoenix. But the fact is when we talk about smoke detectors in the 80s, there was pushback to put them in. Carbon monoxide detectors, there's pushback to put them in. Do you think when we look at our automobiles, they require airbags? Why do we do that? It's a passive life safety device we have to put in there. We're protecting the general public. This is why the model codes are turning that way too. We have to do ground fault interrupters. We have to do this. Now we got to do energy. These things are imposed to protect the general public because they don't always do it themselves. This is how the code process is evolved. This is how technology is evolved. So the fact is to build it right into the new construction is just part of the new code. You have to look at it in that manner.
Well, I'm sure we would see this happen if you did a demonstration that the sprinkler is
No
much
doubt.
bigger. I agree with you there, but we're just saying, why don't you just leave the building instead of, stay in there?
It's getting out.
Right.
It's getting out. When you see how a fire spreads in a short period and see what happens, this is what we're talking about here. A small fire downstairs and you're upstairs, you may not get out. Hopefully you got an escape ladder or a rope or something, or you got a roof to jump on because you may not get out.
But then why aren't we talking about the wall coverings to lessen that spread without this spread? Why aren't we talking about the floor? So it's a carpet on the floor. Why aren't we talking about the carpet on the floor? Why aren't we talking about the paint? Why aren't we talking about the ceiling?
Let's talk about those things. The synthetic products we're putting in the homes today burn hotter and faster than years
But
past.
why aren't we coming up with a code saying you shouldn't do that? You should have something else.
Buildings are fire safe until humans come. When humans come down, they change everything. So these guys might inspect the house, it's perfect. It's all good to go. And all of a sudden you move in and say, listen, I don't like that carpet. I'm getting this carpet. I don't like that wall carpet. I'm gonna put carpet on the wall. You might do
You
that.
can't buy a carpet that does that. Just like I can't buy a refrigerator anymore, like I used to 5 years ago. Now I only can buy an energy efficient refrigerator. Now I can only buy energy efficient furnace. It's there if it's willing to. This is nothing at all about saving lives, in my opinion, in the home building. This is about selling pipes and valves. Because if it wasn't about selling pipes and valves and it was about saving lives, we'd be talking about those old structures and the people in these older homes and coming up with methods and technology to save these people in fires.
It sounds to me like they don't want anybody to build in the township anymore, so permit fees are gonna go down, nobody's gonna wanna build.
I think that we've heard a lot on both sides. I believe the points are well taken. I think our path forward, of course, is taking all that you've given us tonight, putting that together as we have in the past, also letting the Building Ordinance Review Committee digest this, because they are sensitive, of course, to their constituency, whereas we have the fire protection districts that are sensitive to the citizenry as well and their safety. So I think we've gone and covered a lot of ground. I don't wish to basically have the back and forth, because we're going to be able to provide statistics for each and every one. I believe that's the case. But what I will do is take concerns of the Building Ordinance Review Committee and bring them to the Association of Chiefs and lay those out and then take those answers back and share them with our committee. We'd like to make the best decision possible, and what we'd like to do is be as transparent as possible to answer, I would say, the majority of what Will County wishes to do.
Get a chief at the end.
I just had one quick question, please. I'm sorry, my apologies.
I just have one thing I wanted to mention, I hadn't heard it yet. When you take the model code and you reduce it, that opens you up to liability. I haven't heard anybody kind of go down that path yet, but if somebody were to have a house built where Will County said, you don't have to worry about that section of the code, and their family dies, that opens Will County up to a major lawsuit.
Chairman. It's not done willfully and maliciously.
Chairman.
There is some things, because what Will County could do is stay with the 2006 codes of perpetuity.
I mean, that's the other.
And that would be another event that I would hope not happen. But in lieu of that, I think there are some legal things that I would more discuss with our state's attorney's office, which we have been in discussion for quite some time now.
Right, because I've always, in all my years of training, been taught you should never reduce the model code, ever, because that opens you up to liability.
Well taken. Now, Dan DiLamato, do you still have a question?
No, it was answered on the RPZ valves, because I had an office in Glen Ellen, and Glen Ellen adopted the fire sprinkler on residential about 12 years ago. The biggest nightmare it created was it required 2-inch water services. The Buffalo boxes were all like 1.5 inch. And so we need all new water taps on the mains. And their mains were in the middle of the street. The town looked like it was a mess. It was a bigger nightmare than anybody imagined.
And just to add, the Illinois Plumbing Code is followed. If you follow the Illinois Plumbing Code, it uses fixture counts, and it specifically deletes the gallon per minute requirement for the sprinkler system. So Glen Ellen went over and above. They probably could have had 1 inch or 1.25 inch tap instead of 2 inch. So I agree with you on that one.
Typically don't worry about automated taps in the county. But point understood once again. I'm sorry, Chief.
Just for clarification, is the rub here suppression systems in general or single and one and two family residential suppression systems?
We have not had a question in the commercial side. The only question and concerns arose with the 1 and 2 family, simply because the commercial side has been extant. It has worked well throughout this entire period and continues to. But it became a problem when they started talking about the residential sprinkling, as our chairman said, that this brought another element to light at a point when the economy is beginning to rebound, when we're getting calls about the regeneration of subdivisions that have been left fallow for years now. And the thing that I believe that the elected body is sensitive to is the fact that if we're going to get somebody and if we're going to make these viable again, then certainly we've got to make sure that we do it at a point where it's cost effective. And unfortunately, the Illinois law regarding energy conservation has added a lot more money to any kind of home being built. So that, with everything else going on, became a concern, and that's where that lies.
The other thing I'd like to just make a quick comment is, in unincorporated Will County, there's not that much residential building. Almost everything is the municipalities have reached out and they have their mile-and-a-half jurisdiction. The bulk of residential development goes in within municipal limits. And I don't know what the municipalities are doing. Certainly, we don't want to create a different standard outside the municipal boundaries. So in other words, if municipalities aren't requiring it, and then we're requiring it, it really puts the folks who like to build an unincorporated at a market disadvantage. Yeah, I would like to see what the municipalities are doing. I do think it's something that if it's done, it has to be done uniformly in and out of corporate limits, and that everyone's doing it, not just segments of the county. So that's my issue. I don't know if that's been made clear for me, but that's my issue. My issue is really is uniformity throughout the county. And I would also, when the chiefs meet, I'd like to, you and Ray, maybe could also do it. What are the municipalities doing? they're the ones who do the bulk of the residential development. They'll go within the corporate limits.
We do have those current, municipalities that are participating.
I don't know, and they need to come along. I mean, the fire districts need to help bring them along. Not just the unincorporated town. It makes no sense for us to do it in the unincorporated areas and the municipal entities not do it. I just want to throw that out.
I thought that the municipals would be responsible to do whatever the fire district says anyway. Isn't that what?
Well, I think everybody tries to work.
Say that?
Well, here's what it is I think most people are still in 2006 code. Ray, am I correct?
Most have actually come now, I would say the greater part of them are on either 9 or 12.
They're looking at it, just as we are.
But most are on 9 or going to 12.
I did see, most of them, I looked at some of the sheet, a lot of them were on 6.
There's a lot still on 6, yeah.
A couple were on 9.
A lot of them are in flux, just as we are, because of the 6-year cyclical update.
Here again, I think it makes things more applicable when everyone moves together. And I do think the districts can help with that, by the way. I just want to throw that out.
So you said if all the districts adopted the code that way, you guys would have, but now you're saying you probably wouldn't unless we got all the municipalities off.
Well, no, I'm just saying that it's easy, I didn't say that.
Oh, yeah, you're looking for that perfect world.
I said it's easier if everybody's moving in the same direction at the same time. Uniformity throughout the county is important. But if you technically, every district adopted fire suppression, then technically everybody would have to do it. It just comes to a matter who's going to enforce it. Is it going to be the zoning authority, or is it going to be the districts that enforce it? Fire protection districts.
I think the district.
If you have the ability, if it's your ordinance, you have the ability to enforce it. It's just a matter of who's going to enforce it.
I think the fire district should enforce their own codes and let the residents and the builders and everybody go after you guys instead of us. Because we don't deserve, I don't believe in what these codes are. Everybody gets that, I don't like it. But if I can't do anything to change it, I have to sit back and go, okay, well, you guys are the authority. But don't come at me and say, well, what are you going to do about it? You're the one making the rules, so you guys should enforce it.
I'll give you another out. You don't want to.
I'm not looking for an out. I don't even like any of this.
Well, they shouldn't even
The
come.
conversation isn't going the way I would like it to go.
You could reference the code making process. They're the ones who make it up. And then you've got experts from all facets that make up that code. Not just fire, not just architects. It's a whole committee. And I'll turn it to Bob Neal. He'll tell you the input comes from all around. So that's what we got to default to.
If you live
We're
in
not the potential enforcement. We adopt the code, but they don't enforce the code. This comes down to a matter of enforcement. Who's going to enforce it?
After adoption.
After adoption. Right.
And if it's your rules, you enforce it. You guys make the law, you live by the law.
I don't mind enforcing it.
We still have,
We have to work
we
together.
do that now, but we still have to work with the building department, because they need to know our codes, we need to know their codes. So we still have to work together.
I'm not saying you shouldn't work together at all. I'm just a little frustrated in the codes.
You just don't like authority.
I don't want the government telling me what to do every time I turn around. I think that's wrong.
It should be our job to force the 38 districts to do what's right if they know it's right.
You're not
But
forcing us to do it.
that was never happening, to my knowledge.
But you want us to put it in our code. Tell us that the 38 districts are all going to put it in theirs. Then come back to us. Or are you saying you can't get agreement with the 38 districts? They're not all in agreement with it.
Probably looking at Facebook like this because I'm confused, you know? You've got it in your...
Right now, every district has.
Have you adopted the fire code, the 2006 International Fire Code? Every one of your districts has a different code, but I bet, no, they're all the same codes, but they probably have some exceptions, you set different limits. But I bet you if you look at them, they're probably all the same, pretty much the same code, 2006 or 9.
We're 2006,
Right.
so that's what we currently do.
The code in Manhattan is the same one as in Frankfurt, only he stops at 3,000 square feet.
Correct.
And I go to 0. That's the difference.
Same code.
Elwood's the same way, Homer's the same way.
Mokina's the
That's the
same
only,
way.
Mokina's the same way. New Exeter,
Any square foot commercial and you need to explain what, I don't know if you know what the threshold means.
Let me ask you like Mokina, my understanding is Mokina codes, the village's codes are over 6,000 square feet, 7,500.
The sprinkler ordinance is 7,500 square, or where it's more restrictive in the building code.
Okay, so is your code more restrictive than that?
Well, if it was straight out of the code, there are certain situations where you can, get away with not sprinkling a building up to 52,000 square feet.
I'm just asking, what do you enforce currently? I'm just wondering, they're enforcing up to 7,500 square feet. Currently, you don't have residential, one or two family.
Single family?
Right.
No, sir.
Okay.
Foresight, I think it is. Is the city of Manhattan also required to put sprinklers in for their new building?
They opted out, right?
Pardon me?
You guys, they opted out, right? The city opted out, so they don't have to, but I have a lot in Manhattan Township I was gonna build. I spent $5,500 on a plan, and then I find this out.
Yeah, I wish somebody would have let us know before
I
we
spent this
spent money
money.
on a plan.
Because now I wouldn't have built there. I've been living in Manhattan Township for 14 years, paying $11,000 taxes, and I got well and septic, last one plowed, and I love it there, all right? But now I gotta pay probably $15,000. What's the requirements for a house, a 3,000 square foot ranch in the Manhattan Township for sprinklers? Can you tell me?
10 grand.
How much it's gonna cost?
No, what's the requirements? What do I need? A 1,000-gallon holding tank? I need a backup generator? Okay, so what's the requirements? And what all do I need in Manhattan Township to put a sprinkler system in?
NFPA 13D, and
what size holding tank do I need then?
300 gallons.
Okay, and I don't need a backup generator.
Nope.
And then, who's gonna pay for this? I am?
Yeah.
Well, how come you guys won't pay for it?
Because our
Where do my tax dollars go?
Yeah, where do our tax dollars go? What do we get?
I'm paying $11,000 out there, and what do I have? I gotta go to New Lenox to do grocery shopping, basically, or any shopping. There's Burcott's. I mean, I'm just saying. It's easy for you guys to make 150 grand a year, probably, right? Or whatever you guys make.
Find out the guy that makes 150. You know what, you're speaking with emotion, you're not speaking with facts, so let's talk fact and not speak emotion.
The gentleman's
That's insulting.
It's going to be about $10,000 or $12,000.
9 years, and I held on to it. I was gonna build in '06, which then there wasn't sprinklers, okay? But then the economy took a turn for the worse, and we waited. I've been paying $3 grand a year of taxes on an empty lot, waiting to build again, and I finally got up to the point where I could, and then I find this out.
After we spent $5,500 on a plan.
I would have sold it years ago and moved out of
Does
there.
anybody want to buy a lot?
Yeah.
Manhattan Township.
I know Mr. O'Donnell has some lots close to mine too, and I'm sure he's not happy about it either. He was gonna put up a spec error, and now he's not.
Okay, now, we've heard a lot of,
Does get emotional.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, it's,
Yeah, I mean, this was our dream home, and now, like, our dreams have just been crushed.
we understand how the impact does work in various areas, certainly. And we understand where there's sort of an anomaly when a district can put something into effect and it's in a township, but not within an incorporated limits, but that is the legalities of it. That is something that occurs, and I can't say that it's fair or unfair.
Right, I understand. I'm sorry too.
But that's understood. The last thing I want to do, though, is, gather just some final comments so that we can close this. You've all been gracious. You've all spent a long time with us this evening, giving us a lot of good information. And I would certainly like to leave with knowing exactly how some of the impacts are, emotional or not, knowing what some of the pluses are, and where the trade-offs might be, so that I can better carry the questions my ordinance review committee is going to give me to you and present the answers to them again. So, thank you. We have some final comments?
Yeah, let's try to wrap it up.
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, thank you once again for this evening. I thank the others that are here as well. I think clearly the comments addressed by the individuals over here to my immediate left demonstrate the fact why it's important that there be an option provision in this process, for single, 2 units, multi-units. But I also think it's important that the stewards of the county, the elected officials, keep in mind that under the code, you have the ability to opt in and you have the ability to opt out. And I think that's where this conversation has been with the county board. So we appreciate that. We think that's the right course in the context of the ability to either opt in or opt out, and for the builder to provide a choice to the potential buyer. Because just based upon the discussion here on the cost, you're looking at about $10,000 average on a 3,000 square foot home, and based upon the sprinkler individuals, you're talking about a couple $1,000s in cost for water tanks. So at least, depending on the final outline, you're looking at anywhere from $9,000, $10,000, $11,000, $12,000, $13,000, depending on that average square footage.
Yeah, I'm just afraid that if they do adopt it for the new homes and get their foot in the door, what's going to stop them from not enforcing it on used homes, existing homes? And I think the public in these areas are going to think about that if it is adopted, and it might affect the value of the homes in Will County, in real estate sales and construction.
Thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate it very much. If you have any further comments, if you'd like to send a letter to Ray, I'm sure he'd appreciate to hear from you.
You can do so on our website. My cards are here, so you can send them directly to me.
I'd like to thank the Village of Elwood for wearing the flag properly on their shoulders.